The field of mental health counseling is growing rapidly, and Richmont Graduate University can equip you with everything you need as a licensed professional counselor while integrating your faith into your clinical practice. Programs are offered in Atlanta, Chattanooga, and online. Apply today at richmont.edu. That's richmont.edu.
I'm Earlonne Woods.
I'm Nigel Poor. We're the hosts and creators of Ear Hustle from PRX's Radiotopia.
Ear Hustle is a show about life inside prison, but it's not your typical prison podcast.
In this next season, we've got stories about the objects people keep inside their prison cells,
about residents in a women's prison who say they want to stay there,
and the most beautiful prison garden. Earlonne, I will never forget it.
Ear Hustle. Stories about life on the inside, told by those who live it.
Find Ear Hustle wherever you get your podcasts.
You're joining us for another edition of Political Breakfast, and we're here chatting about our summer plans and how hot the beach is. But hey, I don't know. I just enjoy the beach 24/7. How about you, Saba?
Oh, yeah. Any day, all day. If I'm in front of the beach, listening to the water, I'm happy.
Yeah. It just brings a calmness, and you just forget about the world and forget about politics for a moment. Welcome again to Political Breakfast. The Republican strategist Brian Robinson, of course, is here. Theron is off again today, and he's at the beach. He's in Mexico celebrating his wedding anniversary. I believe it's his 5th anniversary with his bride. So he's not here today, but in again for Theron is Saba Long. Saba is the executive director of the Atlanta Civic Circle, and always good to have her here as well. So welcome all of you as we sit here dreaming about the beach.
Yes.
It's the one thing Atlanta does not have.
I know.
No waterfront.
And it's a drive. It's a
Yeah.
chore to get to one from here. But
It is.
Earlier today I was looking online, and all of a sudden this ad pops up, and it's Biden and Harris, and in big words they say they are putting in the work for Black America, and I hadn't seen that before, and I just kind of wanted to get some insight from both of you of what that means in this stage of the campaign. And we knew they were taking it seriously, but they're really taking it seriously this round. Saba, I'll begin with you.
Yeah, I think it builds on what we talked about in the last couple shows. Is the Biden administration knows, the campaign knows, that they've got to do well with Black voters. They've got to energize young Black voters, old Black voters across the board. And this is a very clear effort to do it. Although, Lisa, I'm upset that I didn't get any ads. I haven't received any ads yet. So I'm like, all right, what's going on?
What does that mean, right?
What does that mean? But I think it's the right thing. I think there's a lot of either misinformation or low information, particularly among Black voters, of what the Biden administration has done, whether it's access to health care, access to child care, student loan debt relief, a number of things the Biden administration has done that has been good for Black Americans. And they just need to get that message out in a very intentional way.
So Brian, do you think they're responding to Donald Trump, who says, he's got Black males, he's got Black voters in his camp, and do you think he's kind of murkied the waters where they feel that they have to clear it up a bit?
Which is a brilliant strategy, right? Because, just to go out there and talk about the desire to get Black voters is a good strategy for Republicans. I remember when I was on Capitol Hill, back 15 years ago, it was kind of around the time that No Child Left Behind was passed. And I remember being in the press secretary briefing, and they said, we know in polling that if we simply go out as Republicans and talk about education, that our numbers on education with voters go up. They just want to hear us talking about it. It doesn't necessarily need to be policy specific, but if you show an interest and an investment in it, people are going to respond. They're going to give you credit. And it's the same here. For Trump to talk about his desire to have Black voters under the tent with the Republican Party speaks to them. It makes a certain part of the electorate feel wanted, and I don't think they've always felt wanted. That hasn't always been the case, right? And it is making a difference. And it's not just, hey, Black voters, you're welcome here. It's also on policy issues. Whatever Donald Trump's faults, he does speak in simple terms about a working class agenda. And whether you're white or brown or Black, that speaks to people who are in working class America. So those things are beginning to penetrate. I'll say part of why Saba may not be getting the ads. I'm not getting the ads either, but that's no shock. It'd be really, really bad targeting if I was getting the ads. But maybe the algorithm is so smart they know that Saba is actually not an American voter. So they got to be really, really smart to figure that out. But
Brian points that out quite a bit. Testing Saba.
Yeah. You know, every time I get a message from someone saying, "Are you and Brian cool, or does he not like you? Like, what's the deal?"
No.
I just think you'd be a great American. That's all. I don't know why you're not. I don't know why you don't
come on
pull
to
the trigger.
side. Right.
But all kidding aside, this ad campaign is not from a position of strength. It is from a position of weakness because Biden is having to go out there and shore up his own base. 90% of black voters, and sometimes more, vote for Democrats. The fact that there's a softening of that is an alarm to them, particularly in a state like Georgia, where I said last week, if a 1% decline in black turnout happens in 2024, that is the margin that Biden won by in Georgia in 2020. So they're going out there having to shore up their base and do two things. One, try to claw back some people who are saying in polling they're going to vote for Trump, because we are seeing that. And two, energize those who won't vote for Trump under any circumstances, but aren't particularly that enthusiastic about going to vote for Joe Biden.
This market of black men, Saba, that Trump says that he has in his pocket, is that what's representing the softening on the Biden-Harris side? Is that where their weakness is?
I think to some extent. I think black women have very clearly stood with Democrats and stood with the Democratic Party. They have stood to some extent with Kamala Harris, but there is a bit of a fracture there. And I talk to, I think about my black male friends across age, across income, and there are aspects of the Democratic Party that they are absolutely frustrated with. And there's not a real intention, I think, in the Democratic Party to address some of those concerns, even though some of their policies might be well aligned. So if you think about a working class black male, right, who maybe they are part of a union, Biden policies have been pro-union and pro that working class black male in a way that Trump policies have not been and wouldn't be. And so that's an example of a communication that the campaign needs to have, a very clear, here's how we are helping and supporting black families. That's another thing that I will give the Republican Party credit for. They talk a lot about the family unit and the importance of the family unit in building wealth, in building access to income. And that's something that you don't hear as much in the Democratic Party, although there are real opportunities, again, for them to do that.
What are you noticing, Brian, in terms of Trump getting his base really organized here in Georgia? I know a couple of weeks we talked about Biden and how that's probably going to start happening in the coming weeks, and I think there are signs of that. What about the Trump campaign?
I will talk about the Trump campaign and what is happening there. Of course, he's coming for a big fundraiser here in Atlanta, and we're seeing some dynamism in the polling here in Georgia. We're seeing those margins close just a little bit. Now, who told you for the last 6 months that that's going to happen? Oh, wait, it was me. It was me, wasn't it? This is going to happen. I was worried and remain worried that Republicans were going to rest on their laurels here in Georgia. Oh, we have polling shows us up 8. We have polling showing us getting 20+% of the black vote. We're in great shape. And that was real when it was happening. And I kept saying, the facts on the ground are going to change. A lot of those folks who say they're going to vote for Trump are just unhappy with Biden right now. They don't feel like he's delivering for them. They feel like their wallets are pretty tight right now. It's very expensive at the grocery store. That could change. And I think that is beginning to change a little bit. And so Republicans are going to need to be equally dynamic in changing the messaging. I don't think talking about inflation at the end of this year is going to be the winning message. We got to find something else. On the other hand, look at what Biden is doing. Again, it's almost like he was listening to Political Breakfast. What is he hitting on? Two things. One, his ad on national TV over the weekend is, "I'm not a young man," and then pivots into accomplishments. So going directly at his weakness there on the age issue, which is very real. That is one thing that is not going to go away. That is not going to change with the times. He's not all of a sudden going to like walk, like he's limber and young and not make those mistakes that kind of come with aging. But the other thing that he is hitting at is this black vote that he's going at. So there's two weaknesses, his age and his weaknesses with his own base. And he's going directly at that. And right now, he's able to do it in a vacuum because the Democrats have a significant spending advantage because they've got a lot more money on hand. Now, the Republicans are trying to close that gap. Trump over the weekend had the biggest fundraiser ever, like $50 million raised. He's going to need a lot of those to keep pace with the Democrats because what we've seen over the last decade is this traditional fundraising advantage that Republicans had because the richest Americans had always been Republicans is now the advantage of the Democrats. And Republicans are playing catch up with Democrats. We see it nationally. And boy, do we see it here in Georgia with the massive historic fundraising hauls that Stacey Abrams and Raphael Warnock had.
Yeah, I generally agree. Although I think there's a lot of concern that some of the money that we saw in 2020 and 2022 won't be in Georgia in Democratic circles the way that it was in years past. And so there's some legitimate concern about that. The other thing that's interesting about Trump's fundraising and the RNC fundraising is that when you donate to the RNC, first, the money goes to Trump. Right. So if I max out, the money goes to Trump's campaign, not to the RNC and other Republican candidates. And I wonder about what will be the implications of that down the ballot for Republicans across the country.
One thing that we've said here is we're kind of debating over the last few months, like how seriously the Democrats are going to contest Georgia. And I want to say this. Republicans need to contest Georgia. We cannot make the same mistake that we saw in 2020, where it was in mid-October when Senator Perdue at the time was raising the flag with the Trump campaign. Hey, we got a problem in Georgia. We got a problem in Georgia. And nobody believed him. I knew it was true. I saw it happening on the ground, partly because where I live was sort of the kind of area where Trump was bleeding really badly. But, Republicans have got to take this race in Georgia seriously. Biden has a pathway to the White House around Georgia. It's hard. Everybody needs Georgia, but Biden can do it without Georgia if the blue wall holds up for him, which it didn't for Trump in 2020. Both parties have got to focus on Georgia because while Biden can win the White House without Georgia, it's hard, but he can do it. Trump can't. Trump's got to win Georgia in order to get to the White House. And so they need to be staffing up here. I know that they're working on that. I have talked to some people in those circles, and they're beginning to build a team. The Democrats are a little bit ahead as far as boots on the ground goes. But hey, that's to be expected. It's an incumbent Democratic president who didn't have a primary challenge that was serious. Up until now, Trump's campaign has been focused on the primary, and the resources are now going to be getting spread around to the general election swing states. And so we need efforts here immediately.
Support comes from the Grady Health Foundation, presenting Move for Grady Saturday, April 27th. When you ride, run, or walk for Grady, you help our entire community thrive. There's a distance for everyone, and all proceeds benefit Grady Health System. More at moveforgrady.com.
You love free. And at Ameris Bank, so do we. That's why we're proud to offer worry-free, hassle-free Ameris Bank free checking. Manage your money your way with convenient access to digital, mobile, and telephone banking, all with no monthly service fee or minimum balance requirements. At Ameris Bank, we're with you. For more information or to open an account, visit our local bankers in person or online at amerisbank.com/free checking. Other fees such as overdraft fees may apply. Ameris Bank, member FDIC, equal housing lender.
Is that the general feeling, though, Saba, that the Biden could do this win without Georgia? And if so, what does that mean for the presence here? What are we going to see or what are we not going to see based on that theory?
Yeah, I think the campaign will take an aggressive posture. So perhaps there's a chance to win without Georgia, but I don't think they are going to discount Georgia regardless. Because if you're playing the long game, investing in Georgia and investing in Democrats in Georgia now is going to play off in 26 and in future elections. And so the smart thing to do would be to put money on the ground in Georgia. You think about what does that mean for statewide political infrastructure. And again, what does that mean for future federal elections where Georgia can again be in play?
If you could rank the importance of the battleground states, where does Georgia rank overall, do you think?
We're going to rank Georgia number one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We kind of have to, don't we?
We're not number one right now as far as both parties are concerned because we haven't had the tightest polling over a period of time. Now, if we begin to have that, I think that will begin to change. But I do think you got to start from 2020 and work your way out from there. Where were the tightest elections then? It was Georgia and Arizona. We had the smallest percentage margin. Arizona had the smallest numerical margin. Of course, we're bigger than Arizona. But it has looked in recent polling as if Wisconsin and Michigan are a little more competitive. And so I think for now, that's where the focus has been. But, I think, Trump has kind of lead here. It shows a willingness of voters to vote for him. I'll remind people that there is this phenomenon where Trump underperforms in polling because people don't want to tell the stranger on the phone that they're voting for Trump. And even with that disadvantage, Trump has had leads here in Georgia over the last year. So we know there's a willingness to vote for Trump and to say it out loud. And they've got to take advantage of that. And, as I've mentioned when we were discussing the fundraiser last week, whenever Trump is coming here for a fundraiser or maybe even like a legal court thing in Fulton County, they should build a political event around it and just remind Georgians of how important this state is and his affection for the state and his vision for America. And again, I cringe a little bit when I see some of these rallies because there's so much talk about 2020 and so much talk about the court cases. Trump can win despite the court cases, but he's got to have a vision for America for the next 4 years. And he can do it. He's capable of producing that. And that's what they need to be focused on.
A lot of people shake their heads when you say that and when others, that he could win despite these court cases.
Yeah.
Why is that? Why is that, Saba? Why is that a reality?
Because there's my truth, your truth, and the actual truth. And that's really what this comes down to. I have a dear family member who's a Trump voter, and they fundamentally believe that the cards have been intentionally stacked against him. They believe that the judicial system has come out against him and it's political. And it doesn't matter what the facts say, that's their belief. And I think I said on a previous episode, Trump has become a religion. It doesn't matter what I tell you, if what you believe is X, then you're going to believe that no matter what. But I think ultimately that's a small percentage of the American people, right? So if you think about most Republican voters, I don't think most Republican voters believe that it's a quote unquote political witch hunt. But Trump has used language and he has used symbolism to his advantage to really drive that point home.
I think that it derives somewhat from what Saba is saying, that people have made their minds up already. We don't know what the jurors are going to say, but we already have our own opinions on the facts of the case. There are no facts out there that we are waiting to get. So people can make their own conclusions about whether or not this stuff is criminal. There was a Babylon Bee, which is a satirical conservative site, headline last week that said judge issues court gag order on Trump for pointing out the people prosecuting him are Democrats. And I think that really encapsulates in a wry way how Republicans feel about this. There's some of these cases that do have probably some legal merit, but some of these cases out of New York are so political, so over the top that it undermines the credibility of all the others, right? The $450 million fine for inflating the value of his properties and then, devaluing them for tax purposes. Okay, if he's guilty of that, that's a crime. He should pay a penalty. But $450 million for a crime that has no victims? I mean, he didn't defraud these banks at the end of the day. They all got their money. All the bills were paid. He didn't declare bankruptcy and leave them holding a bag. Like, this just seems to the average rational person like overkill. And it's just there are a few Democrats when it comes to Trump. They do have Trump derangement syndrome, and they go overboard and give him enough of an argument about the prosecution being persecution that he's able to like sell that even when the case has some merit.
Yeah, but I would add on the flip side of that, Brian, is Trump has also been probably the only defendant that we know of who has been able to attack judges, attack their families, and he hasn't seen a day in jail for it. If you and I did that in a case, we would be locked up. And the fact of the matter is, he has been given an incredible amount of leeway time and time again.
Which is what the Trump way, right? As far as the Biden campaign, and Saba, I'll let you begin. Are they doing what they should be doing? Is their strategy on point today, 2024, April 8th? Is their strategy on point? Because there was some concern early on that too much time was spent on defending his age and all of that good stuff. Are they on point here in Georgia?
I think they're getting there. It's early still, right? They still have some time, but there's a lot more education that needs to happen around, again, what have you done for me? Right? That's what the voter is going to ask themselves at the end of the day when they go press that ballot box. What has Biden done for me and my family and my life? And I think he needs to do more of a job of articulating that. I think they've also got to handle, things related to housing affordability, some of these bread and butter issues, kitchen table issues that folks are dealing with, and make the clear contrast, right? At the end of the day, when you're voting, not only are you voting for someone, right, but you're also voting against an ideology and against a candidate. And that's what the campaign needs to do, I think, a stronger, better job of, is making the clear case. This is what your life would be like under Trump. This is what your life would be like under 4 more years of a Biden-Harris administration.
The Georgia delegation, and Brian, you probably are in tune to this. What are they saying and what are they feeling about Trump at this point? I know there was a large denomination that was against him and wanted to separate themselves from them. But where do they stand now that he is going to be the presidential nominee?
Well, our delegation has been pretty firmly behind Trump all along. You did have Rich McCormick, who endorsed Ron DeSantis, but as soon as that was over, he switched his endorsement over to Trump. So they're a united voice. And you're seeing on the state General Assembly level, there's a little bit of distance there. And I don't mean distance as in like they won't be seen with Trump or anything like that, but they have their own agenda. They have their own set of accomplishments that they're able to focus on. But at the end of the day, if there's a Trump endorsement list, you're going to see all of those names on that list. And what I want to see the Trump campaign do is to kind of show the mirror image of what Saba's saying and what Biden needs to be talking about. Trump's folks need to be talking about immigration because it is a hot button issue with voters. It's something they care about. It's something they're seeing in their communities. It's something that they don't like. And Joe Biden can say that, we're doing all this and the Republicans didn't pass this bill. That's fine. Americans know Biden didn't take this issue seriously for 3 years. Now, they made Kamala Harris the border czar, and she never went to the border. The only thing we saw Biden do in that first term was sue Texas for trying to do something. That's what we saw them taking action on. And this is a great dividing line between these two candidacies. Now, I am less excited about taking a post-up view of Ukraine with Biden because I actually support helping Ukraine. And I think that Trump risks a split in his own party if he talks too much about not funding Ukraine's efforts against Russia, because there's still a lot of the legacy Republican Party that supports our international role and supports standing up to autocracy and militarism over in Russia.
Yeah, the Trump presidency is going to continue to be an American first presidency. At least that's what he portrays it to be. But if you contrast that to what Biden has done, I mean, if you think about from a national security standpoint, investment in the CHIPS Act, investment in infrastructure, both transportation and otherwise, there are some clear differences between those two candidates. And those are the types of things that Biden needs to articulate. I think he should admit that they have not done a good job on the border, but he can point to, here's what we're doing, and here are other ways that we have advanced to move the country forward.
Saba Long is the executive director of Atlanta Civic Circle. She has managed and led digital and traditional communications and strategy for political campaigns. Brian Robinson is a Republican strategist, communications consultant, and former deputy chief of staff for Governor Nathan Deal. Thank you both for joining us. Georgia First Lady Marty Kemp says as of now, she would not vote for former President Donald Trump. I want to talk about that in our next edition coming up later in the week. So thanks for joining us today, and we'll talk about that soon.
At a time when information continues to come at us faster and faster, sometimes you need to hit pause and rewind. NPR's Throughline takes you back in time to the source of the news stories filling your feed. Find NPR's Throughline wherever you get your podcasts.
Have you donated to WAB yet? I know you've heard us talking about why it's important, but it doesn't have to be this big decision. You can give at whatever amount fits your budget. It can be a spur-of-the-moment thing. You already get so much out of public radio, so just go for it. Visit WAB.org/donate and become a member right now. And thank you.